Welcome back, it's really good to see you. I'm Michelle from After Addiction and I run a hypnotherapy service called Heal Hypnotherapy. Today we're going to be looking at why you can't leave. Why can't you leave? Why don't you leave? We'll be going and having a bit of a deep dive on this today, so please watch until the end of the video and then you can contact me if you want to for some more information. We've got to start with a disclaimer today. You know, if your partner or your loved one is in active addiction, or in polysubstance use, that means like using more than one substance, very common with alcohol and cocaine. I'm sure that's not a surprise to you. However, if this is your loved one, please make sure that they see a medical professional before they see anyone like myself. The thing is, if you are here because you want to help somebody or you're looking for tips on how to help somebody that you love who has an addiction issue, whether or not they even understand that they do, then the message today is there's still a lot you can do, but it's got to start with you. You're not the one that's going to have to go through a medical detox. You're not the one who really needs the acute medical care that your loved one might need, I'm assuming. So if you're looking for the therapy, if you're looking for something, then you can start with you. And I'm going to be talking today about how you are stuck in the cycle and what we can do to change. So this is how addicts get stuck in their cycle. Okay, addicts use a substance, then their dopamine spikes, then they have the relief or anesthesia. Then over time, the brain will adapt to the substance. Therefore, it doesn't behave ordinarily when the substance isn't there, causing distress, causing withdrawal, causing other problems. When the brain adapts to the substance, then you develop a tolerance to that substance. And then when that substance is removed, either by choice or you run out, then there is withdrawal to go through. We kind of know this. And the withdrawal is the thing that I'm really, really focusing on today. You've got to be really careful and make sure that your loved one gets to see a GP. Medical detoxes for alcohol can be over a week. It can be a week, and it can involve lithium. It can involve mood stabilizing drugs. It can involve having to monitor blood pressure, having to monitor all your vital signs. It can be something that you need to go into hospital for. This is alcohol withdrawal. And I've seen it. I've had friends multiple times to go in hospital, and it's really unpleasant. So if you are the person that isn't in the addictive loop, let's look at the loop you might be in. Here's the loop. Even though the enabler's not used and their brain gets involved in a very similar cycle, this is called, you get intermittent reinforcement. Addicts cycle, you see, unpredictably through, and you might recognise this, crisis, remorse, sobriety attempts, and then relapses. Enablers, they receive unpredictable moments of connection, brief hope, affection, possibly calm in the household, and this mirrors how gambling addiction forms. Sometimes it's bad, and when it's good and it pays off, you want to stay, you want more. So and in the enabler's brain, that's someone who's been covering up for or tolerating or helping in some way the addict continue their behaviour, even though that was not the intention. With the enabler, you see that this mirrors the way that actually a gambling addict's brain might be working as well. Sometimes when you gamble money, it's bad, you lose your money. Sometimes it's good and it pays off, potentially. So that's not a substance you're putting into your body. However, anyone who has gambled, who has been excited about winning or losing some money, will kind of understand that there is a chemical process taking place in the body. And this is what happens when you are near somebody who is using and you're trying to help them. Okay, so sometimes it's bad and sometimes it's good. And actually, when I talk to people who are struggling with loved ones or what to do with their loved one who's in addiction, you hear it. You hear that, well, we had a couple of good days a few weeks ago. They didn't drink like they did at such an event where actually they completely wrecked the event. So I'm hearing the addict, the enabler sounds as if they are letting off their addict. It's like they're making excuses, but it's not, because that in essence that's true. There have been lucid moments. There have been times when the addict is trying actively to remove themselves from that behavior. And that's tough. That's really tricky for a family member or a friend to deal with. Enablers feel compelled to stay. If you love someone, if it's your partner, your friend, you feel compelled to stay in that relationship. And we really need to look at, how you can stay in that relationship if that's what you want, how you can stay in it, but also protect yourself and protect that addict as well. Okay, so what happens when you are enabling, or when you are not the addict but you're loving the addict? You're living with somebody whose cortisol, that's a stress neurotransmitter, cortisol, that is actually coursing through them all. If you're living with an addict, your cortisol will spike. That's a stress hormone. You will perhaps recognize in what I'm saying. I know I've certainly felt like this. I felt very frightened. I felt unstable in myself because somebody I loved was unstable in their self. I felt financial anxiety. I felt, what they're going to do if they lose the job. And later on, when I became a very, very problem drinker, I used to really worry. I had financial anxiety reaching so far into the future, I can't tell you, probably further into the future than I was willing to admit to myself that I might actually live if I carried on drinking in the way I was doing in midlife. But we'll come on to that. That's another video. I'm going to talk specifically about women in midlife and why this is a problem for us. So when the addict then is, you've got emotional chaos as well to deal with. You're emotionally chaotic when you love somebody who's got a problem with substances. When the addict then stays sober for a day or for a brief amount of time, or expresses tenderness, promises a bit of change, maybe breadcrumbs you a bit, the cortisol drops in your body if you are the enabler, and your dopamine rises. Dopamine's a feel good, it's a reward chemical. It's what we seek. We seek to feel good. So this relief is a chemical relief. A little bit like that relief when you win money on the horses. It's not something that you've put into your body that's provided the relief. It's what's happened in the external circumstance. The gamble has provided that relief. And actually that's what's happening when you are loving an addict. Every time they use, it's like putting all your money on a horse, isn't it? Seeing whether they're going to be okay or they're not going to be okay. It's going to pay off, or it's going to cause further disaster. And that is the kind of way that you may find that you're living, because it builds over time, because that it's insidious, isn't it? Alcoholism, it kind of starts quite slowly for a lot of people. They're not full-blown alcoholic on the first sip of sangria or something. So it's difficult to see it happening. It's difficult to understand that it's happening, because it becomes your own neurobiological adaptation to what is going on around you. And although outsiders can see it, you probably can't. It's very difficult. And that's why I'm making these videos, hopefully. So, we can get there quicker. We can understand quicker, what is happening to us, what's happening to the person we love, and how we can both get help. That's why I'm doing these videos. So the relief becomes chemically reinforcing when your loved one decides they're going to have a bit of a sober period. And you might think, if I just hold on a bit longer, he seems to be making progress, she seems to be doing a lot better. Play it forward, really. Think about the next 6 months and think about the strategies. If that person you love is in a sober period or is trying really hard this time, look at what you can do differently. Look at what you can do yourself to make sure that pattern continues and does not go back to the cycle that I'm talking about today. If I hold on just a bit longer, things might get better. That is the trap. That's the trap. We're going to talk about oxytocin and trauma bonding. High stress relationships create really strong attachment bonds, even these relationships that are unhealthy. Oxytocin is a bonding hormone, And this hormone rises when you're caring for the addict, like looking after a baby. You know, the only reason we kind of do it, the reason we look after babies is largely to do with the feeling we get when we do oxytocin. Now, your addict is not a baby. However, caring for your addict, it feels like an important role. It gives us a sense of purpose. And that's quite difficult to deny. You know, it might make you feel good at first to do this before you realize the harm that you may inadvertently be causing to your addict friend or your addict partner. You're protecting them. You're rescuing them from crises. And over time, the brain will confuse that caretaking ability with emotional closeness. This creates for you what's known as a trauma bond. The bond is made up of periods of intense fear, some affection, which is intermittent when the person you are bonded with wants to get well. This is compassion, really. This isn't saying that we should not tolerate our addict and not support them, and it's looking at ways in which we can just shift a little bit of emphasis, usually back onto yourself, and then create the environment where you're no longer reinforcing the pattern and you make it less and less attractive for the person to go back to using the substances. It's not all on you. This is not on you. It's just getting us to understand that when we're in this position, the attention is probably best served on ourselves. We have identity reinforcement as well. Over time, the enabler's identity becomes that of a rescuer, that of a caretaker, that of the stabilising influence in that person's life, and as the protector, of course. Being needed, it's that being needed becomes reinforcing in itself, and that it's a painful position to be in, it really is. Have you ever wondered how the addict and the enabler are similar neurologically? You know, what's going on in the brain? Because there's a lot of similarities in terms of outcome. You know, let's have a look at what's happening. Only one person is using substance. However, both people in that relationship create reinforcement loops involving dopamine, involving cortisol, and involving their attachment, how they're attached to each other. With the addict, the substance relieves the pain and helps the dopamine to spike, so they feel good, temporary euphoria. In the enabler, that represents possibly a crisis. So their dopamine might spike, and they will, if you stick with sobriety, it will, believe me, I'm several years into sobriety and I can't tell you how good I feel most of the time. Even when terrible things happen, it's better than drinking a couple of bottles of wine a day. Believe me, it really is. So crack on, carry on if you can, stay sober. So in the addict, the substance relieves the pain, which leads to a spike in dopamine. And in the enabler, their dopamine can spike when there's a crisis, a moment of connection. For the addict, in withdrawal, this creates stress, a hell of a lot of stress, which can lead to using again, as we know. And then in the enabler, that's the chaos returning, it's the stress returning. So the brain adapts to tolerance with the addict, and the brain adapts to tolerate the dysfunction. So when the addict forms the addiction, the other person forms these enabling or codependent relationships. The addict, their substance is hard to quit, really, really hard to quit. And in the enabler, it makes that difficult to leave, really hard to leave, because there are intermittent bits of reinforcement, because the person you love maybe bits in there that you recognise before they had the addiction problem. There may be that hope, you may be future projecting to a time when they are totally well and they are doing what you want them to do. And that's the trick in the fantasy, really, isn't it? It's that when you look at somebody, you want them to get better. Are you really wanting them to get better for them? I think yes. But when you look at yourself, what is it that you are imagining they will be in 6 months' time? And that's where therapy can come in, because it's really useful to talk to somebody about You know, what is it that you do want? I ask a lot of questions to clients like this. You know, what is it you want when your addict actually does become sober? And sometimes the fantasy might not actually be something that their loved one is actually capable of. It's difficult for me as a therapist because most of the time I haven't got the other person in the room with me. So both become chemically conditioned to stay stuck in the cycle. And it feels so hard to break the cycle because the brain learns pain, relief, repeat. For addicts, the substance is the relief. For the enablers, the hope, the apology, the moment of calm, or the sober period might be the relief that they need. So different triggers, but the same kind of reinforcement loop. If you do like these videos, please like and subscribe and let me know what you want me to cover. You know, it's a vast area, this, and it really helps to grow the community.